Well, elections are always a numbers game, and after yesterday's contest, the biggest yet of this election cycle, with 11 states in play, and let's not forget American Samoa on the Democratic side, there were hundreds of delegates up for grabs, and we're going to do the math and handicap the race for the Oval Office while keeping an eye towards New York State and our April primary. So did Super Tuesday steal the Empire State's thunder, or will New York State finally get some electoral respect? Helping us to wade through that and more will be Marisa Buchanan. She's an NBC News special senior producer. Thanks for joining us at the table today. And I also want to welcome City and State editor Jon Lentz. Thanks for being here, Jon.
Thank you.
So at the offset, in the interest of keeping everything above board, we have to say that this very special guest is also the wife of BRIC TV's executive producer.
BRIC family.
BRIC family. The family's expanded. We're happy to have you guys. So we had the numbers. We're looking at the delegate count right now. But just off the top, who were the clear winners and losers of these things? There was a lot of talk of, Bernie can win by not losing so bad, and Trump really has to deliver if he's going to really solidify this front-runner status. But Marisa, who won the thing with the numbers?
Are we talking Dems or GOP?
From each side.
Okay, so Trump definitely was the clear winner on the GOP side. Right. Cruz and Rubio today are trying to madly figure out how they can take delegates from him for the rest of the cycle. And on the Democratic side, Hillary, her Southern, you heard it on television all last night, the Southern firewall strategy worked. Yeah. And she won African-American voters in huge numbers, and Bernie Sanders just didn't. He did come through on 4 of the 5 states that he was hoping to win. Yeah. But if you look at who voted for him, it was white male voters, and that's not the Democratic Party that we all know. So Hillary and Clinton and Trump are the ones to beat, but really they're the front runners, clearly.
So Jon, looking at the Republican side, Marco Rubio finally got one in there with Minnesota. So He's got one win under his belt now. Is the writing on the wall? Do you think his campaign really is still going to keep plugging ahead and saying he's the adult in the room?
I think they will, even if it's longer and longer odds to really gain some traction here. Both his campaign and I think John Kasich's campaign have said possibly this could go to the convention. There could be a contested convention. So it looks like they're not going to drop out. Cruz is definitely not going to drop out. He picked up a few states. And, it could be almost unprecedented in recent memory how this plays out. And so, it wasn't a complete victory for Trump. It was kind of the same, did pretty well, but didn't knock anyone out, it looks like.
So we saw last night Trump is at 316 delegates. Cruz is behind him with 226. There's still there's 1,237 delegates that you need to wrap the thing up. But what about this prospect of a contested convention? That's something I've never seen in my lifetime, and it's kind of exciting to think about the prospect. But then you look at the people who might be in it. Are you guys excited about the prospect of going into a contested with those specials you're producing?
I mean, yes, another full disclosure. For those of us who actually do the television coverage of elections, again, in my lifetime as well, a contested convention would actually make a political convention worth covering.
Story.
Every 4 years we sit there and spend so much money covering what we already know the results to be.
It's a coronation.
Right.
Yeah.
So if there is a small chance that could be the case, then yes, it would make those 4 days of television coverage at least that much more interesting. But the fact of the matter is that the Republican Party, the story right now on the Republican side is just so incredibly fascinating. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you're watching a civil war going on within the party. You're watching the establishment not know what establishment candidate to pick. You're also watching a number of voters, in a huge majority of voters in these primary states, really kind of give the finger to the establishment by voting for Trump because they want an outsider. And even if Rubio makes his way all the way to the convention and has this strategy of contesting it, do you really want to be taking delegates away from a country that has voted in a different way? It's not necessarily the right message that you want to have. And at the end of the day, Rubio's story last night was one state, Minnesota. That's
he acted like it was a real victory.
Well, he has
was
to.
like pumping it up Minnesota.
He has to. I mean, they all have to. Ted Cruz had to win Texas.
Right.
He did that. Rubio was really hoping for Virginia, and it didn't come through for him. So they all have to tell the story that they want, because perception is just as important.
Can we talk about this perception on the other side, though? Looking at Bernie Sanders and Hillary, like, she's clearly like miles ahead at this point. But Bernie's got the money and he's got the will to run it up until the wheels fall off the thing. But he sort of seemed to have tried to change the narrative a little bit, talking about this is my victory is a victory for America, and changing the conversation. So it was almost like he was pulling back a little and saying, I am going to stay just to be the agitator if the writing's on the wall. Did you get a sense of that?
Certainly, right. I mean, he talked about staying in to the end, but some people on his campaign, I think, were saying, look, we have won something here. We have changed the narrative. And I think you've seen that with Hillary Clinton, pivoting a little bit, trying to reach out to those supporters of Sanders that are really concerned about big banks and Wall Street. That's been, the one issue she's been dinged on a few times. That said, go back a year, no one even knew who Bernie Sanders was. So perhaps he could continue to surprise. But I think you're right that the math shows it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah.
But historically, like Hillary last time didn't concede until June, when she talked about all of those cracks that were in the ceiling that she couldn't quite break through that last one. So how does this early interest that has been largely stoked by Trump, to be like blunt about it, like how does all this early interest and so many people paying so much attention so early on play to coverage and ultimately deciding the election, do you think?
Well, Hillary needed somebody to go against. She was, for a little bit too long, the inevitable candidate, which is never good for her. She needs to fight.
Yeah.
You saw that the last time around too. Even though she lost, she came back in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
The U.S. primaries are remarkable for what they turn candidates into. They really go through the ringer, and she has gone through the ringer this time around too. I mean, you said it exactly right. She's now talking a lot more about Wall Street. Bernie Sanders has done exactly, even if he is not the candidate, not the nominee, he's done exactly what he needed to do.
She's talking about Flint.
Exactly. She's talking about issues that really matter to him and really matter to a whole different group of people. And those issues, if she's the nominee, are going to carry through into the general, because she's now learned that they're important to a giant constituency that she needs in the general, and she needs Bernie Sanders voters. So she has to do, and she's been doing it the whole time during these debates, she has to do this delicate dance of hitting Bernie, but also saying, hey, once he's gone, Bernie's supporters, please come and follow me and vote for me.
To that end, when Romney got killed by Obama in the last election cycle, the Republicans were either going to have to make more white voters turn out or tap into voters of color to get their numbers up. But now we've seen Democrats just aren't showing up at the polls in the same numbers, and Trump has sort of created these first-time voters who were never involved in the process. So that's scary to a lot of Dems. Do you think that people will actually sit home or sit out if Bernie doesn't get the nomination? Those young folks who energized Obama's campaign?
I mean, it's hard to predict anything in this race, but if Trump turns out to be the Republican nominee, I think there will be enough backlash among a lot of Democrats just really concerned about who he would be as president. You even see that with Republicans, obviously, that there's a lot of concern. I'm guessing the next few weeks before there's a few big races, primaries in mid-March. Florida, Ohio, Illinois. I'm sure Rubio's people, Cruz's people, they're going to spread the airwaves with attack ads and really try to take Trump down, even if it might be too late at this point. But I think that could
Paul
spur.
Ryan yesterday gave him a little bit of a spanking without saying his name.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, they all are kind of making little gestures here and there just to make sure that people know that some of the rhetoric that, at least some of the rhetoric that Donald Trump had is not acceptable to the mainstream of the Republican Party. But you brought up Florida and Ohio. These are home states for Kasich and for Rubio. They have to.
Really bad if they don't
Rubio
win
doesn't
home.
win Florida, then it's really
Might be over.
it might be over for him. And Kasich, the same thing for Ohio. You have a hard time going forward once you can't even get your home state involved. That said, if they win those states, and those are winner-take-all states, Florida has
That's a big deal.
something like 99 delegates in Florida.
Al Gore knows exactly how.
Well,
many
exactly,
delegates.
right. So these are big states to win, and they could really help fracture the delegate and really give a hard time to Trump as he moves forward. But that's why all of this is so fun to count and do the math with.
Speaking of fun, a lot of people were having a lot of fun with Christie last night and all the memes that were blowing up my phone. Bringing it a little bit closer to home, Christie Todd Whitman last night was talking about Rubio, talking about her governor over there and Christie and how he's out there with this man who she has the courage to say, okay, he's not the guy who's the values of our party. So I wonder, just in your respective newsrooms, what the approach is to covering Trump when a lot of people think he's gone from a curiosity to being dangerous. And if you guys have sort of inside baseball talks in your respective rooms about how to cover it.
Well, I mean, we don't cover it a lot because we focus on New York and New York City politics. But I think he really did start out as this curiosity and fascination. No one took him seriously. All the pundits were saying, look, he's going to fizzle out at some point.
Yeah, HuffPo put him in entertainment at a point.
Right, exactly. And it's, I think, even more surprising that you see Christie getting behind him.
Yeah.
I'm sure some supporters are unhappy to see that. Based on what Trump has said, some of the attacks he's made that just are seemingly unprecedented. I don't know, I guess from a ratings perspective for TV, I mean, it's got to be great.
I mean, Trump has been a double-edged sword, specifically to NBC, having been an entertainment person on that channel.
Yeah.
But, church and state with the news division and entertainment. But I think people on our air have even said that, yes, he was considered a curiosity, your word, some other words have been used early on in his candidacy, and that it took a while for people to take him seriously. And that, frankly, played to his advantage. But the media played a definitely strange role in this cycle because he is a very entertaining figure.
It saved him a lot of cash.
He has played to his strengths, and that is catnip for television and very hard to look away from. But that said, he's also made the political cycle. He's energized it in a way that a lot of people wouldn't be paying attention to otherwise.
People were watching Republican debates months ago.
Yeah.
It was hot outside, and we were actually tuning in and tweeting about it. But is New York ruling the table by proxy? We've got Bernie from
Brooklyn.
Mill Basin-y down in Brooklyn. Midwood. We got Bernie from Midwood, Hillary from Chappaqua by way of Chicago or something, and even Donald Trump is from Queens. But we're not seeing a lot of New York injected into the thing. Like de Blasio had to come home. He couldn't even get his forum running there. But are our issues making it to the top of the sort of heap with other things?
I don't think so, at least not yet. Though it could be one of those very unusual years where both races last into mid-April when New York
never
goes.
happens.
Right. I mean, I think it happened with Hillary and Obama in 2008. It was still up for grabs, or at least contested. But the Republicans, they always, or have historically, rallied around the frontrunner very quickly. But April 19th, New Yorkers could actually have a voice in both of those. It's a lot of votes, but it comes so late, they're not going to be paying attention until a few weeks out, which it's still early March now.
So Marisa, our crack research team here has been trying to find some kind of substantive numbers on how Bernie versus Hillary's doing right here in New York, in the state, in Brooklyn, in the city, and we really haven't gotten to the essence of any numbers. Does NBC have any reportage on this thing, or have any idea how they're playing in the state?
In New York, I don't know if they've done any polling specifically in New York yet, because it's
There is actually in early February,
city and
a
state.
local pollster did some polling, and they found that I think by 21 points, Hillary was ahead of Bernie. I think both of them would have beaten Trump in a head-to-head matchup. Trump was a little bit ahead of Rubio. Christie was still in the race, so he was in the mix. But it looks like Hillary's the favorite, the hometown favorite, even though Bernie still has that accent.
The New York primary will be totally interesting if we're headed towards a contested convention and people are Cruz, Rubio, Kasich are trying, Carson maybe if he says he's still
He's not going to be
in
Florida.
that they're still trying to pick up delegates wherever they go, and if that's the case, then yeah, New York becomes totally interesting, and then you have a whole dynamic of Trump,
Hometown boy made good.
Yeah.
Well, the state GOP has said, actually, that's what they hoped for this year. The way they set up the calendar, they wanted it to get to this point. They wanted it to extend to mid-April, where New York voters could actually play a role in who the Republican nominee is.
Yeah.
It seems to be playing out like it could happen.
Yeah.
It may not be quite what they wanted in the end.
Yeah.
What you
So
asked
that's
for.
interesting because really nationally the calendar was set this time. They can play with the primary schedules every 4 years.
Yeah.
And last time Romney had such a difficult time that they sort of front-loaded a lot of the
to get the
primaries
momentum there.
so that you could get a lot, probably. Unfortunately for New York, but now they're looking at that, and if any other candidate besides Trump had won the states that he had won with the margins that he had won up until this point, we would not be talking.
Yeah.
We would not be talking about the second and third candidates in any other state. They would say, okay, now we just got to get to the convention.
Yeah.
So the fact that we're having this conversation about who else is out there, can there be anyone else, is just so interesting, and their calendar hasn't helped them with that. So now they have all these strategies.
Well, that is going to finish us up. We've run over time, but we'll definitely be watching NBC and reading City and State, checking out your analysis. Thank you both for being here. I appreciate it.